ਵਿੱਚ ਚੋਰ ਬੜੇ ਹਾਏ ਫਾਏ ਦਿਲ पे दराती साडे चल जाती मारे दिल गुलाटी पूछे वाए वाए
It's great because it feels like you have two different parts of you that you can tap into when you want to, whether you want to wear like a sari or you want to go all out in your new prom dress.
Being Indian definitely has like made me more aware of other cultures.
I have dual citizenship, which means like I'm equally a citizen of India and like the United States. So, and I travel there like for vacation and I have a lot of family there. I speak the language of my parents. I'm involved in like the classical arts of the country too, so it's very ingrained in my identity, I would say.
People have this idea that Indians are always smarter.
Kind of like, as an Indian, there's more academic pressure, not just from your parents, but from schools, and the teachers always expect you to do better because you're Indian.
Being Indian gives you a lot more pressure to do well and maybe sometimes can suppress your identity. Like, say if you're someone who's more liberal or not as conservative, being Indian can kind of put a damper on that, I feel like, and you might not be able to express everything you want to express. Say, for example, I love painting, but like, what if I wanted my major to be painting in college? That's not very realistic. Being Indian, like, of course not. My parents would not pay for that.
Being an Indian who grew up in America, was like born and raised, I kind of had this like challenge, I guess, of like blending the two cultures. You know, my school of thought is very much American, but like my beliefs and culture is Indian, so you know, like I'm very much like a liberal and like I promote all of these ideals that a lot of Indians do not, but I also value like a work ethic and like a lot of other things that Indian culture promotes.
The culture itself has kind of like integrated into like my life here in the way that, you know, I view the world a little bit.
Very competitive, smart, but maybe not naturally smart, just like really tries really hard.
Stereotypical Indian spends all summer taking SAT classes and AP Bio classes, then goes to high school and takes like 4 or 5 APs and studies all the time, doesn't go out, and then goes to a really good college and does the same thing again.
Studies a lot, does nothing but study, and listens to their parents, I guess. Their parents are very demanding, maybe like arranged marriage kind of thing.
Probably highly educated in the US, like doctor.
They enjoy festivals and getting together and celebrating different holidays and religious functions.
Raised to focus on school at first. It's like your first and foremost priority when you're growing up, especially. I'd say the idea of like collectivism, which is basically like putting a group like your family or your culture before your own personal wants. That's a big part of being like stereotypical Indian. Most Indians want to be like a doctor or engineer, or even if they don't want to, that's what like they grow up inclined to be because that's, you know, what's encouraged.
They think that parents push the children to study.
A stereotypical Indian would be somebody who is very good at studies and is very smart, most likely to become a doctor, has pretty strict parents, eats a lot of spicy food.
Good at school, you know, listens to their parents, they're obedient, a little bit on the shy side.
Aspiration to become something better, which is probably not that uncommon from a lot of other places. At the same time, if you compare it to somebody like US, people are generally happy, so they are not desiring as much to shoot up, whereas if you're in a resource constrained country like India, to survive you have to shoot up.
I'm not particularly smart, nor am I'm competitive, but I don't think to the extent that the typical Indian is.
All of it, pretty much, except I guess my parents are not as strict with like going out and stuff, like, or in high school they didn't really, like, I didn't go out a lot, but in college, like, they know I do and they don't mind as long as I do well in school, so.
The study hard thing. I don't think I listen to my parents as much as I should.
Well, I'm not very academic at all, so that's kind of different.
Well, I do want to be a doctor. I'm in medical school, so that's like one thing. I really like math and science, which I guess is like another part of that. I love Indian food.
I can relate to the fact of having strict parents and wanting to be a doctor, but the whole aspiring to be a doctor is more on myself rather than my cultural background.
I think definitely the focus in school, a lot of Indian parents, put the major focus on education.
Overachieving and really like academically motivated and being like some of that just comes from the culture, and then there's another stereotype of like how the parents drive the kids a lot. But I mean, like with all stereotypes, I know plenty of Southeast Asians that are not like that.
A stereotypical Indian is like a very studious kid who excels in school. I don't think all Indian students have anything particularly in common. I mean, there's like the stereotype, you could say they're all studious. Most of them are studious. I don't know, there's some like really good athletes who are Indian. There's some really good like artists who are Indian. They're not all just like the nerdy stereotype.
I've never necessarily felt out of place, but sometimes I feel like I'm much more conscious of my race and my skin color than I should be, because there's so many race issues going on right now, and we're having like a big debate about it politically. And in America, it's like everyone is looking back at the Civil War and saying we took a great step forward, but are there any more strides we have to take to completely eliminate racism? So sometimes I do think about that a lot, and I'm constantly thinking, how am I different? But I've learned to embrace that more than just say I don't fit in.
I have to admit, when I was younger mostly, now that I've matured I don't feel this way that much anymore, but I've always kind of wanted to be American and not be Indian because of like simple rules that like parents follow.
In high school, everyone was white. I gotten used to them calling me Tanvi instead of Tanvi, and it just kind of gets annoying after a while. Like when you're with them, you're like Tanvi, Tanvi, Tanvi. I'm like, that's not my name.
I didn't feel like I was left out or anything. There was always just a little piece of me that felt like, I can't really relate to these traditions or the way, people are doing things, or, like even the food that we bring to like school. Sometimes if I like bring Indian food, everyone else has like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and those little differences I think matter to me when I was younger.
Living in California, I haven't felt that as much because there's so much diversity. So even if there's not that many other Indian people necessarily, there'll be people of like all sorts of different nationalities, which makes me feel at home in and of itself, just the diversity not being the only like minority, you could say. Some of my cousins who have grown up here are a lot less like culturally Indian than I am. They've grown up like a lot more, you could say, like whitewashed, as a lot of people put it. So sometimes they consider me like too Indian for American standards, but then if I go and visit India, I'm like not Indian enough,
I never felt that in the Bay Area. It was like because in the Bay Area the Indians kind of are the majority, and then I go to school in Illinois, so over there it's majority white, and so I felt very out of place. Like in my dorm, just my roommate and I were Indian, and the only reason she was Indian is because I chose her. Like I knew she was Indian.
Yeah, definitely. Anytime when a substitute comes and they pause at my name, yeah, that feels a little weird.
I overheard one of this girl talking like, I don't want an Asian person in our photo shoot. I just like, that's the only part where I felt like I was excluded from something, but I was still there, and I just like could like sense that from that girl, like I wasn't wanted there.
You know, if you brought rice to school for lunch, people would be like, ew, what is that?
One incident that kind of stuck with me is when I was in Athens. They have police on some of the busiest streets because they're looking for illegal people who are in the country illegally. And so there were a lot of people walking by, and there's some people with darker skin tones too, and what I noticed personally is first when I was walking by, I was like, only the people with darker skin tones are being, like, they'll like grab your hand and ask you for your papers. And then it happened to my dad, maybe like 2 minutes before it happened to me, which is, it shouldn't be happening that often to people. Like, it's not a coincidence, is basically what I'm saying. So it was kind of like, okay, that's kind of racial profiling, but I'm not in the position to complain about it.
Oh, I most certainly have, probably more so in my earlier days when culturally I was so far out of the mainstream.
I do feel different. Sometimes I feel that I'm in a very old-fashioned way still.
When I first came, I really was careful when I was out there and didn't want to be different. Our mannerisms were different, our accent was different, and we didn't know some of the etiquette, local etiquette. So we learned it hard way. Nobody told us what the local etiquette was, so yeah, we learned it by observing.
You know, I definitely probably felt very inferior as an Indian. I felt inadequate for a long time. So I had to really kind of step up and go out of my, you know, natural boundaries to engage with American culture and society.
The topic hasn't really come up that often just because they think that I'm probably not gonna date because my life is very academic and like friend oriented right now. I absolutely do not want an arranged marriage. You ask me if I feel proud about being an Indian. I do. When people mention arranged marriages, I do not at all. I hate the idea. I understand why it's there, but it's very archaic, you know. It's not, it shouldn't be about wealth, it shouldn't be about like family, it should be about how you feel about the person. And I know my mom is fine with it. She thinks in America it should not be a thing, but in India it's completely understandable.
Actually, I do want my kids to date because I think it's an experience. I want them to grow up.
I don't think my mom wants me to date. I'm going to high school right now, and I don't think she wants me to date because she wants me to focus on studies. And I get that.
My parents are against dating only because they think it's a distraction from high school wise, but in their minds there's like a time and place for everything, and they just don't think high school dating is okay. But after I graduate and kind of am on my own more, they're all for it.
They're okay with me having a bunch of friends who are girls, but yeah, they say you shouldn't, they're okay with me like dating, but they say it's gonna make it hard in my studies until like I should only do it when I'm like college and whatever.
My brother and I don't really care. No. First I want to get a job and stuff.
I mean, I'm open, coming even in India on my level, I'm open to whatever they feel comfortable with, right? I'm not fixated that they should, have an arranged marriage, or they shouldn't date, or they should date.
My dad isn't really that strict about anything. He's just like, don't get pregnant, don't get in trouble, just do what is good and stay focused on what you need to be focused on. Focus on yourself and your friends and your family and your studies first, and then you can branch out. My mom is like, no one is good enough to date in high school because they're stupid, so wait until college and wait you can form real relationships.
The time spent dating is time you could do to accomplish to get to better schools and better professions and whatnot. In terms of later in the life, my opinion, which I share with my kids, is how to make the choice, what makes a good partner, what is likely to work in the long term, and how is a decision that should be made very, very carefully.
Basically, since I was a kid, I've been like dead set on doing medicine, and even though my mom says that, oh, you can be whatever you want, it was kind of at the pushing of her. Like, she didn't do it intentionally, but she kind of bred like both me and my sister to become doctors. Like, I memorized all the like vital organs, and I knew all my carpals and tarsals like way before anyone else should. And like, you know, like when we didn't have a babysitter, she would just take me to the hospital, and I would hear all these like noises, you know. I know all this like about how the hospital worked, like the patient-doctor dynamic. I knew a lot about the profession, so it always just seemed like that was for me.
With my brother, he recently got very sick and he was in the hospital for 6 months, and I saw how my dad immediately reacted like that, and he just like helped out, like he told the doctors what to do, he told like everything, and I was just very interested in that.
A lawyer, a defense attorney lawyer.
And of course, my mom wants me to be a doctor, like every Indian parent ever.
My dad works in finance and my mom works in like computer engineering. So they both kind of want me to go in different directions.
They're happy I'm studying accounting and finance.
My dad wants me to be an artist because I like art. My mom, she thinks that I should do something more practical, like be a doctor.
I'm studying computer engineering.
Well, I either want to become a doctor because I could help people, or a robotic scientist.
Not in a negative way, I would say. I would say, like, if anything, they are more open to appreciating my culture because they know that I'm, like, willing to teach them about it. I mean, they've been to dance performances of mine. They've seen how I interact with my own culture, so I feel like they appreciate that way. And, like, now that Indian culture is kind of spreading more to the West with, like, the theme, like, bohemian or, like, with henna tattoos or stuff like that, like, I feel like they're starting to appreciate it more, but in the long run I would like them to be aware of the cultural dynamics that actually happen in India rather than when they were moved more to America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because of my skin color and because of some of my traditions and culture. I identify as American though, as an Indian American.
I could think they identify me as someone who is Indian but who grew up here, so has kind of the same culture as them.
Yeah, I think they do. Like, that is a big part of my identity. Even when you're with other people, like one thing I notice when I'm in Illinois and I'm with people of other races, like I can't just do whatever they do, like, and part of that is because like I'm Indian, I have stricter parents and stuff like that, you know, like it's just different like values and different lifestyle, I guess.
I think one thing that comes to mind is like the pronunciation of my name. The traditional way is Anjali, but I tell people that my name is Anjali. I think I identify with the name Anjali more than I do Anjali because I am not a traditional Indian in any way. I'm different. You know, I'm the second generation, so you have to take those original values and kind of spin it so that they work with how you think and how your peers think.
My friends actually like me more because of it, because they really want to know, like, what do they do there, how do they eat. It's actually helped me a lot sometimes.
My parents know a lot of other Indian people because it's just kind of a thing, like we're magnetic, I guess. We all know each other. So I connect with a lot of people from the same cultural background as I am, and we have these things called pujas. It's a ceremony, and you like dress up in Indian clothes and you chant certain things, and it's a lot of fun sometimes. That's the main way I connect. Also, when I visit India, sometimes seeing like my grandparents, people who've lived there their whole life and know a lot more about the culture and know a lot more about just my ancestry and everything.
I tried learning Hindi. Yeah, that didn't really work though. I don't know. I don't really do that much. I've been to India several times, so I guess there's that.
It's the type of dance that I have been doing for the majority of my life. Is called Bharatanatyam, and it's Indian classical dancing. And I've been doing that since I was 4, and I'm still doing it, so going on about 13 plus years. And a lot of like stuff on Hinduism that I did not know of, and of India in general I did not know of, I've learned through dance.
We have a lot of, like, with Indian family, friends, and cousins, like, that live near me, we have a lot of Indian parties. So we wear, like, Indian clothes and everything, have Indian food, or if we go to, like, Indian festivals at the temple or something. So there's never, like, we're never really, like, completely disconnected from Indian culture.
Well, at UIUC there are a lot of Indian there's like ISA, Indian Student Organization. I have a ton of Indian friends. I never, honestly, like, even in California, I never really listened to Indian music that much, or like I don't really like Indian movies, but I still know a lot about the culture. A lot of my friends, like, they teach me so much about it. I took in South Asian Studies class for my Gen Ed, and so I learned a lot about, like, the Bhagavad Gita and like a lot of Indian folktale stories and stuff like that. So I do stay connected by, like, taking classes related to it. Next semester I'm taking a Bollywood cinema class, so we literally just watch Indian movies and write essays on it.
I do dance, and that's the Bharatanatyam, classical Indian dance, which is pretty much the extent of my cultural connection to India.
At UC Davis, where I'm, like, involved in the Indian Student Association, so I'm constantly, organizing events that deal with Indian culture, meeting other Indian students. I think that's definitely one way. And I'm also, always watching Bollywood movies, spending time with, like, family friends, celebrating Indian holidays and festivals.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah, I'm so proud of it. I identify that as Indian as a big part of who I am, and I'm probably never gonna let that go, like, in my life, because I think just the fact that I was born there, but I'm still able to maintain it living here, I think shows enough that, like, I'm very proud of my culture and where we come from, and who we are as, like, a people. So yeah, definitely.
Yes, I am very proud. I'm so proud of my religion. It's just so unique.
When Holi comes around and I get to explain to people what that is, that's also a really amazing experience, because then, wow, my culture is kind of cool and other people seem to appreciate it.
I am proud of being an Indian. I can say that way better than I probably could have when I was younger, only because now I realize how diverse and how with open arms Indian culture awaits anybody. Indian culture is something that treats, like, your mind, body, and soul.
I'm just happy to be from, a country with so much history and culture, and it's an exciting thing, to have that and to have access to that. So it'll always, be part of my identity.